Thank you very much, Ivo. Yes, I will give you a presentation in relation to assessment of generics, but first, I would like just to give you the definition, the legal definition of generics of generic medicinal products in Europe. So, according to the Directive 2001/80/CEC, a generic medicinal product is a medicinal product which has the same qualitative and quantitative composition in active substance as the referent medicinal product, the same pharmaceutical form as the referent medicinal product, and whose bioequivalent with the referent medicinal product has been demonstrated by appropriate bioavailability studies. The different salts, ethers, isomers, mixture of isomers, complexes, or derivative of the active substance shall be considered to be the same active substance unless they differ significantly in properties with regard to safety and or of efficacy. The various immediately released oral pharmaceutical forms shall be considered to be one pharmaceutical form. So tablets and capsules, oral dispersible tablets, um, oral solutions are considered as the same pharmaceutical form. And bioavailability studies need not be required by the applicant if he can demonstrate that the generic medicinal product meet the relevant criteria as defined in the detailed guideline. The investigation of bioavailability and bioequivalent. This is in the case of biowaiver. According to the Article 10.1 of the directive, the applicant shall not be required to provide the result of preclinical and clinical trials if he can demonstrate that the medicinal product is a generic medicinal product of a reference medicinal product which has been authorized for not less than 8 years in the EU. But the generic medicinal product, once authorized, can only be placed on the market for 10 or 11 years after the authorization of the reference medicinal product, depending on the exclusivity period applicable in the reference medicinal product. As you can see, for the definition from the quality viewpoint, the only common things between a generic and a reference medicinal product is they need to have the same active substance and quantitative and qualitative and the pharmaceutical form. The rest can be different excipient, different manufacturing process of the active substance finished product, therefore different use of reagents and different specification. So for the evaluation or the assessment of a medicine in general, of a medicinal product, the Quality Working Party prepared a series of guidelines which provide recommendations on the information which need to be submitted in a marketing application. It is assumed that these guidelines represent the current knowledge and technical and scientific progress. This will be applicable for generics and for any other product. Some of these guidelines are sole EU guidelines. Others have been adopted through ICH or BICH, depending on veterinary or human medicinal product. Also, some guidelines refer to new, especially for the ICH guidelines, refer to new active substance finished product in the EU. The pharmaceutical legislation makes no distinction between quality requirement for new or existing active substance finished product. Therefore, the V or ICH guidelines are also applicable for generic medicinal products. Also, for existing known active substance, the European Pharmacopoeia General Monograph, substance for pharmaceutical use is also applicable. Then, as you can imagine, generic medicinal products are assessed in their own merits. It's evaluated whether the dossier describes adequate quality of the product. The application should be comprehensive dossier based on the current EU guidelines and pharmaceutical pharmacopoeia requirements. The suitability of the product for its intended purposes should be demonstrated, and the manufacturer of the product is of considerable quality, meeting current scientific states of the art. This is very important because sometimes reference medicinal products are all products that they have been in the market for more than 10 or 11 years, and they were evaluated at the state of the art at that time, but generics should assess according to the current state of the art. Therefore, the requirement for generics sometimes can be different than for reference medicinal product at the time that they were assessed. The following elements should be taken into account in the assessment of application for generic product. The quality documentation, the documentation submitted in Module 3, the guidelines and other common requirements, for example, pharmacopoeia, the pharmacopoeia justification made by the applicant in the application file, and in addition, if needed, the information submitted by the innovator in the scientific literature and other common information might be considered also by the assessor. It is not the responsibility of the assessor to search for justification, interpretation, or other conclusion, but to assess if the information and justification provided by the applicant is adequate. All consideration from the assessor should be fully documented and adequately and critically discussed in the quality assessment report, in particular in critical aspects of the development. In addition, the application and discussion of general risk assessment strategies at early stage of the development is encouraged. A critical aspect arising during development studies with regard to the originator, product, and other similar products should not be ignored by the applicant. And finally, the requirements that the generic of reference medicinal products have the same qualitative and quantitative composition extends only to the active substance, not to other ingredients of the product. However, different in excipients or different in impurities must not lead to difference in safety. Therefore, an assessor might want to see a comparison of the formulation and means of administration. In cases, for example, for parenteral preparation, eye drop, patches, where an impact on the safety and efficacy profile cannot be automatically excluded. And now I would like to present you some specific consideration on impurities. It is expected that the applicant justifies in the dossier why he considers the impurity of his product in his product safe for the intended use and qualifies either by reference to expected similarity with the reference medicinal product or by other means, for example, compliance with the relevant guidelines. In the development part, it is expected to find a discussion whether the product is likely to have a different impurity profile as compared to the reference medicinal product. Especially when this is the case, the level of impurity should be kept as low as reasonably possible. The level of impurity for reference medicinal product is usually low, and this should not be, in principle, be different for generic medicinal products. Where the level of impurity observed in generic product is higher than in the reference medicinal product, it is expected that the discussion take it into account the active substance development and possible impurity sources, like the synthetic route, side reaction with excipient production condition during manufacture for a generic product is provided, and it should be provided by the applicant. Also, in the case where the impurity profile of a generic product differ qualitatively from the reference medicinal product, or whether higher amount of impurities are seen, the full qualification of other adequate information about the safety of this impurity should be requested by the assessor. If the level of one impurity in a generic application is higher than the threshold defined for qualification, the applicant is also expected to provide the appropriate justification. This can be by way of reference to published literature, demonstration of the respective impurity can be regarded as a qualified by use, and it has been already present in relevant market products, or for example indicated for use in the same species, same route of administration, or by respective studies in the relevant B or ICH guideline. It should be kept in mind that a comparison of different impurity profile is difficult and sometimes is not necessarily meaningful. If a higher impurity level than that of the reference product has been adequately discussed and qualified, where necessary, the application shall not be refused where the assessor considers that the product safety is not adversely affected. In summary, when assessing as a life to a medicinal product, consideration may be to be given to the potential cumulative safety effect of the degradation product. Where an existing medicinal product has a similar impurity profile but a higher level than that in the generic medicinal product applied for, no action is necessary since the impurity profile is considered qualified by use. And now some specific consideration for those pharmaceutical forms where bioequivalent study is not possible, and a specific consideration for semi-solid and liquid pharmaceutical preparation. This, the pharmaceutical form, the qualitative and quantitative composition of the finished product, microstructure or physical property, product performance, for example, dissolution, in vitro release test, and administration should also always be compared. And just as a summary and a message you can take home is that generic medicinal products are assessed on their own merits. It is evaluated whether the dosage describes an adequate quality of the product, and according to the current EU BICH guidelines and pharmacology requirements, and where the level of impurity observed in a generic product is higher than the originator, it is expected that a discussion taking into account the active substance development and possible impurity sources, for example, the synthetic routes and reaction with excipient production conditions during manufacturing for a generic product it should be provided by the applicant. Here you have some reference. You have the link of some reference that is published in our website as the recommendation for the assessment of the quality medicinal product containing existing known active substance. The investigation of bioequivalent, this is a scientific guideline, and the reflection paper on the dissolution specification for generic solid oral immediate release product with systemic action and product specific bioequivalent guidelines as well. With this, I finish my presentation. If you have any question, happy to discuss.
Thank you very much, Jose, and for this presentation. It was short, concise, and I do appreciate that you didn't put in the complex graphs that Brian had in his presentation. And with that, I would like to open the floor for questions. I'm checking online. I see nothing in the chat. And of course, generics is what most of us have to deal with anyway, quite a bit. So I would like to see around the table if I can see everyone in the back.
Ivo, we received some questions some days ago from the net. So if you want, I can go through them because I think some of them are quite interesting.
There's one question now in the chat, Jose, yes. And the question is how to approach the case when the bio batch is less than 100,000 units and manufacturer wants to upscale it. So I'm not sure. It's something you can address here.
I mean, this question is a little bit more pure assessment. You need to see what is the case and what is the documentation submitted by the company. So in general, as I said before, I mean, they should follow the guideline that is they are published, even if it's a generic or a reference medicinal product. But this question, I don't think that is in reference to generic medicinal product.
I think I'm going to ask Brian to comment a bit on it as well, because to me it looks like change management here.
Yeah, so what we're not clear about here, are you talking about within the initial assessment or change management? So within the initial assessment, if the commercial scale is bigger than the biobatch, that would need to be assessed at the time of authorization, and it would depend on whether it's a standard manufacturing process or a non-standard manufacturing process in terms of how much validation data you'd need to see. And then later, if they want to make the change by variation, again, it depends on the manufacturing process, whether it's standard or non-standard, and whether they intend to scale up within tenfold or more than tenfold, depending on what scale they want to achieve. It could be a type 1B or a type 1A variation. But again, in each case, it comes down to the actual the particularities of that particular product and the manufacturing process and the exact scale relevant to the biobatch.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. Jose, you said you had received a number of questions before the meeting, so again, floor is yours if you want to go through them.
Yes, I received some question that interpretation of in-use stability data for generic products should all studies done by the reference product be requested from the generic product as well. As I mentioned it before, I mean the generic should be assessed on their own merits. It's not linked on the quality part. It's not linked to the reference medicinal product. So it depending how the characteristics and stability of the generic medicinal product, it may be adequate to have the same in use stability studies or different because excipients are different, impurities may be different. So it depending on the justification from the company should be if it's adequate to provide the same in user stability studies. I received another one from Serbia. What are the key attributes and development of generic semi-solid and liquid pharmaceutical preparation? I included in the previous slide what is the consideration for semi-solid and liquid pharmaceutical preparation. Another that it is acceptable for unit dose aqueous parenteral drug preparation to contain preservative if reference product is very old and contain conservants. I mean, as I mentioned before, the assessment is according to the state of the art. Maybe at the time of the reference medicinal product, it was needed this preservative, but now no. So we should consider at the state of the art that we are currently assessing the generic medicinal product. If currently is not needed, it doesn't need to be included. Even the generic medicinal product contains this preservative. Another one is what should be the approach of the generic medicinal product containing excipient different from the reference medicinal product. According to the European legislation, always the generic medicinal product can contain different excipients, and this should be assessed according to the guideline QWP guideline on excipients. Compatibility studies should be done, as it should be done with the active substance and the other excipients, and it should be done for any other product. So there are no difference between a generic or other product. And the last one, it will be when it is stated that microbiological quality after the dilution is the responsibility of the practitioner or microbiological control question in use studies. This is the same. It's depending on the product and but it's not linked to the reference medicinal product. It will be it should be assessed on the information submitted by the company for the generic medicinal product. And I don't know. This is the question we have received.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I think it would be good for participants to have those questions in writing and maybe short answer from your side, Jose, if you could provide that, so that they can look back into it, because apparently these are questions that are coming from the group. I guess it will be appreciated if they can reread that later on. With this, I'm again looking around if there are questions or if it has given rise to questions, and if not, and also online, then I think that was clear. I think we can then close the morning session if there's no further questions. I would like to once again thank audiovisual support team and the presenters as well. Oh, there's a question? Online, sorry. There's a question online. Could you more clarify what does it mean qualified by use for impurities in generic products? Jose.
Yes, qualified by use is I mentioned it is when the product, other product has been used with this with this level of impurities, and there had not been any problem, and so they can compare with other products that they have this level of impurities, and then they have not been, and this is considered the qualified by use.
Well, thank you for that. I hope that was clear. I'm not in a hurry to close it, so please, if there's any more questions. And there is a question back there.
Hello.
Can you introduce yourself,
yes,
please?
Sure. Sultana Avoli from Kosovo Medicines Agency. I'm very glad to be among you here. My question is also related to the impurities, but elemental impurities. What can be considered as sufficient documentation in order for a generic product to be covered for this aspect, specifically for elemental impurities?
I mean, the level of impurities, and it should be the same that the level of impurity for any other medicinal product. So they should be in according to the guidelines, the ICH guideline on impurities. Yeah. They should have the same level.
Of course, I understand the part where the same level of quality and purity, of course, but my question was more addressed to the level of documentation. So it should be the same tests and the same cross-referencing, or does it have any differences or something?
No, it should be the same. I mean, the product exactly can be completely different. The only different can have different excipient. The manufacturing process can be completely different. So the impurities, the elemental impurities, can be completely different. It should be provided the same documentation that for the reference medicinal product.
Thank you.
I'm looking around again and online. Thank you for the question. And if nothing, then I am now going to close this morning session.